30,000 years ago, a 130-pound human with a sharpened stick walked toward an animal that weighed 8 tons. The woolly mammoth stood 13 feet at the shoulder. Its tusks could throw a full-grown man 30 feet through the air, and yet the human won, not once, thousands of times, across every continent, for tens of thousands of years. The question is not whether they did it. We know they did. The question is how. That's what we're about to answer. Subscribe to The Buried Lair so you never miss one. For most of the time that modern humans, people exactly like you and me, have existed, they did not have farms. They did not have grocery stores. They did not have anything except what they could make with their hands and find in the wild. And yet somehow, these people with stone tools and wooden spears regularly hunted animals that were bigger, stronger, faster, and tougher than anything most of us will ever see in the wild today. Woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths which stood the height of a 2-story building, Irish elk with antlers that spread 12 feet wide, steppe bison, almost twice the size of modern bison, short-faced bears that could run as fast as a horse, cave lions bigger than any lion alive today. All of these animals were hunted by prehistoric humans. We know this because of the evidence they left behind. Let's talk about what evidence actually means here, because some people assume ancient hunting is mostly guesswork. It is not. Archaeologists, scientists who dig up and study old objects and bones have found something remarkable at sites all over the world. At a place called Schöningen in Germany, researchers discovered wooden spears dating back 300,000 years. These were published in the journal Nature Times in 1997 by a team led by Dr. Hartmut Thiem. The spears were balanced like modern javelins, designed for throwing at a distance. They were found alongside the butchered, meaning cut apart and eaten bones of wild horses. But that is just the beginning. At Clovis sites across North America, named after the town of Clovis, New Mexico, where the first tools were found in the 1930s, researchers discovered something stunning. Finely crafted stone spear points were found lodged inside or directly beside the bones of mammoths. This is not theory. This is a stone point in a mammoth bone from 13,000 years ago. The kill is right there in front of you. At a site called Murray Springs in Arizona, Dr. C. Vance Haynes, one of the most respected archaeologists in American history, documented mammoth bones with clear-cut marks from stone tools. The marks show exactly how the animal was butchered. You can see where prehistoric hands worked. But here's where it gets unsettling. These hunters were not just occasionally getting lucky with a single mammoth. At a site called Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, dated to around 26,000 years ago, researchers found the bones of more than 100 mammoths, all in one place. This was not a natural graveyard. The bones showed butchering marks. There were stone tools everywhere. This was a processing site, a place where people came back, again and again, to work with the animals they had killed. These people were not surviving in spite of the giant animals. They were times building their lives around them. So, how did they actually do it? Researchers have pieced together several methods, and not all of them involve standing in front of a charging mammoth with a spear. The first strategy, and perhaps the most important, is simply intelligence. Humans are slow. We are weak. But we are extraordinarily good at remembering things, planning ahead, and working together. Dr. Pat Shipman, an anthropologist at Penn State University who wrote the 2015 book Times, The Invaders, argues that one of the defining features of early modern humans was their ability to coordinate complex group behavior. Simply put, we are the only animal that can make a detailed plan with 20 other beings and execute it perfectly an hour later. A single human cannot kill a mammoth. But 20 humans who have spent weeks watching a herd, who know which animal is old or injured, who have planned exactly where to drive it, and who will throw from where those 20 humans have an excellent chance. The second strategy is terrain. Early humans used the landscape as a weapon. There is a site in the Yukon, Canada called Wally's Beach, studied by researcher Michael Waters and his team and published in the Times, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Times in 2011. The evidence there suggests that ancient hunters drove animals toward natural features, steep riverbanks, boggy ground, deep mud, where a mammoth's enormous weight became a disadvantage rather than a power. A mammoth stuck in mud moves very slowly. A human throwing a spear does not need to move at all. This technique, driving animals into traps or off cliffs, is called surroundment, or cliff driving, by archaeologists. At a site called Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump in Alberta, Canada, a site so important it is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, there is evidence that early North Americans were driving bison over a cliff for almost 6,000 years. The bones at the bottom of the cliff are stacked nearly 11 meters deep. The third strategy is endurance. Humans have a remarkable ability to run for very long distances without stopping, far better than most large animals. Anthropologist Dr. Daniel Lieberman at Harvard University has studied this extensively. His research, published in Times Nature, Times in 2004 with Dr. Dennis Bramble, suggests that the human body evolved specifically to run long distances. We sweat, which cools us down. Most animals cannot sweat the way we do. In the heat of the day, a human can chase a large animal until it overheats and collapses, a technique called persistence hunting, which is still used by some traditional communities today. But here's where it gets unsettling a second time. Some researchers now believe that our ancestors were not just good at hunting these giant animals. They may have been 2 times good. The Pleistocene extinction. The Pleistocene is the time period ending roughly 11,700 years ago, saw the disappearance of about 65% of all large mammal species on Earth. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, giant beaver, short-faced bears, all gone. The timing is extremely suspicious. In North America, these extinctions happened right around the same time humans arrived. In Australia, the megafauna, the word for very large animals, went extinct roughly 46,000 years ago, right around when the first humans showed up. This is called the overkill hypothesis, first proposed seriously by researcher Dr. Paul Martin of the University of Arizona in the 1960s, and published formally in his landmark 1973 paper in Science. Martin argued that early humans, arriving in new continents, encountered animals that had never seen a human before. These animals had no fear of us. They did not run. They were easy targets, and humans, so efficient and organized, hunted them before they could adapt. Not everyone agrees. Some researchers, like Dr. Gary Haynes at the University of Nevada, argue that climate change at the end of the last ice age was the primary cause of the extinctions, and that blaming humans is oversimplifying a complex event. The debate is genuine and ongoing in academic circles. The truth likely involves both factors: climate stress, weakening the populations, and human hunting delivering the final blow. But either way, the hunting skill of these ancient people was clearly something extraordinary. We cannot talk about this without talking about the tools. The stone spear points found at Clovis sites are some of the most beautifully made objects in all of human history. They are thin, razor-sharp, and fluted, meaning they have a groove carved along the base to help attach them to a wooden shaft. Making one requires hundreds of careful strikes with another stone. It takes real skill and practice. Later, ancient people developed something called the atlatl, which is a throwing stick that acts as an extension of the arm. By using a short handle to launch a spear, a human can throw it far faster and with far more force than an arm alone allows. An atlatl can drive a spear deep enough into a mammoth to reach its vital organs. These devices appear in the archaeological record around 17,000 to 20,000 years ago in multiple places around the world. These were not primitive people swinging sticks randomly. These were skilled engineers solving a very specific physics problem. How do we put enough force into a point, from a safe distance, to kill something that could crush us instantly? They solved it. And here is what this really means: the conclusion that most people are not willing to sit with. We talk about ancient humans as if they were just barely surviving, scraping by in a cold and terrifying world, lucky to make it through each day. But what the evidence actually shows is something profoundly different. These people were dominant. They were the apex predators, the animals at the very top of the food chain on every continent they reached. They outthought, outplanned, and outlasted creatures that dwarfed them physically in every possible way. And they did this with minds that were biologically identical to yours and mine. That person standing on the frozen plain with a sharpened stick was not less intelligent than you. They were not less capable. They were not primitive in any meaningful sense. They were you, just with different tools and different knowledge. The same brain that can navigate a smartphone or solve a math problem was also the brain that figured out how to take down a 13-foot mammoth on a frozen steppe by working together, reading the land, and waiting for exactly the right moment. This means that the story of ancient humans is not a story about weakness gradually becoming strength. It is a story about a species that was already extraordinary, already organized, creative, and powerful enough to reshape entire ecosystems long before anyone built a wall or wrote a word down. The woolly mammoth went extinct. The human with a sharpened stick did not. Think carefully about what that tells you about us.